Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Food. In this video, we will explore the complete and detailed process of how cheese is made, from the very first drop of fresh milk to the final, perfectly aged wheel. This narration is intentionally slow, thorough, and repetitive. It is designed to help you relax, focus, or drift peacefully into sleep. There will be no sudden sounds, no music, and no emotional tone. Only the steady, neutral voice of information, guiding you step by step through each stage of this timeless craft. Now, please sit back, close your eyes if you wish, and let the story of cheesemaking begin. Cheese is one of the oldest and most enduring foods known to humanity, a product that bridges the gap between simple nourishment and complex craft. Its story begins thousands of years ago in ancient pastoral societies, where people first learned to preserve milk through natural processes. Over time, cheese has evolved into a food that exists in countless forms, shapes, textures, and flavors. Yet the basic principles of its creation remain rooted in the same quiet transformation that has taken place for millennia. In the world of cheese, there is no rush, because the making of cheese follows the pace of nature and the patience of tradition. At its core, cheese is a way of capturing the essence of milk and holding it in a form that can last far beyond the moment it was collected. This preservation is achieved through the careful control of biological and chemical processes that work silently over hours, days, months, or even years. Each wheel block or wedge of cheese represents not only the milk from which it came, but also the decisions of the cheesemaker, the conditions of the environment, and the passage of time. The world of cheese is vast and varied. There are cheeses that are soft and spreadable, and others that are firm, crumbly, or elastic. There are fresh cheeses that are ready to eat within hours of production, and aged cheeses that mature slowly in cellars, gathering depth of flavour with each passing season. Some are mild and creamy, while others are sharp, pungent, and complex. This diversity is the result of countless small choices in the cheese-making process, each one influencing the final character of the cheese. The making of cheese begins with milk, but milk is not a uniform substance. It can come from cows, goats, sheep, or buffalo, and each type of milk brings its own qualities to the finished product. Even within the same species, the milk changes with the season, the diet of the animal, and the environment in which it is produced. These subtle variations contribute to the uniqueness of each batch of cheese. In the hands of a skilled cheesemaker, milk becomes more than just a liquid. It becomes the foundation for something that will change slowly through the stages of coagulation, cutting, draining, salting, and aging. These steps are not rushed because each one builds on the last, and each one affects the texture, flavor, and structure of the final cheese. The introduction to the world of cheese is an introduction to patience and attention. It is about understanding that something as simple as milk can become something far more complex through time and care. It is about recognizing that cheese is not just a product, but a process, and that this process is shaped by both human intention and natural forces. Across the world, cheese has taken on cultural significance in ways that go beyond nutrition. It is present in celebrations, in everyday meals, and in the identities of regions and peoples. A wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano tells the story of the Italian countryside and its centuries-old regulations. A round of brie speaks of French pastoral traditions. A block of cheddar carries the history of English dairy farming and adaptation. These connections make cheese not only a food, but also a link between past and present, between land and table. In every case, the making of cheese is a slow and deliberate act. It does not seek instant results, but instead allows for the gradual unfolding of texture and flavor. It is an art that is grounded in science, a science that is guided by the senses, and an outcome that is guided by time. The introduction to cheese is therefore an invitation to observe the ordinary made extraordinary by transformation, to appreciate the way that milk changes form through gentle yet precise actions. It is also an acknowledgement that this transformation cannot be hurried. The flavors we associate with cheese develop not in moments, but in hours and days, in months and years. To understand cheese is to understand that slowness is not a drawback, but a necessity. This is the quiet world of cheese, a world that moves at its own pace, where human hands guide natural processes, where each batch tells a unique story, and where time is the most important ingredient of all. Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Food. In this video, we will explore the complete and detailed process of how cheese is made, from the very first drop of fresh milk to the final, perfectly aged wheel. This narration is intentionally slow, thorough, and repetitive. It is designed to help you relax, focus, or drift peacefully into sleep. There will be no sudden sounds, no music, and no emotional tone. Only the steady, neutral voice of information, guiding you step by step through each stage of this timeless craft. Now, please sit back, close your eyes if you wish, and let the story of cheesemaking begin. Cheese is one of the oldest and most enduring foods known to humanity, a product that bridges the gap between simple nourishment and complex craft. Its story begins thousands of years ago in ancient pastoral societies, where people first learned to preserve milk through natural processes. Over time, cheese has evolved into a food that exists in countless forms, shapes, textures, and flavors. Yet the basic principles of its creation remain rooted in the same quiet transformation that has taken place for millennia. In the world of cheese, there is no rush, because the making of cheese follows the pace of nature and the patience of tradition. At its core, cheese is a way of capturing the essence of milk and holding it in a form that can last far beyond the moment it was collected. This preservation is achieved through the careful control of biological and chemical processes that work silently over hours, days, months, or even years. Each wheel block or wedge of cheese represents not only the milk from which it came, but also the decisions of the cheesemaker, the conditions of the environment, and the passage of time. The world of cheese is vast and varied. There are cheeses that are soft and spreadable, and others that are firm, crumbly, or elastic. There are fresh cheeses that are ready to eat within hours of production, and aged cheeses that mature slowly in cellars, gathering depth of flavour with each passing season. Some are mild and creamy, while others are sharp, pungent, and complex. This diversity is the result of countless small choices in the cheese-making process, each one influencing the final character of the cheese. The making of cheese begins with milk, but milk is not a uniform substance. It can come from cows, goats, sheep, or buffalo, and each type of milk brings its own qualities to the finished product. Even within the same species, the milk changes with the season, the diet of the animal, and the environment in which it is produced. These subtle variations contribute to the uniqueness of each batch of cheese. In the hands of a skilled cheesemaker, milk becomes more than just a liquid. It becomes the foundation for something that will change slowly through the stages of coagulation, cutting, draining, salting, and aging. These steps are not rushed because each one builds on the last, and each one affects the texture, flavour, and structure of the final cheese. The introduction to the world of cheese is an introduction to patience and attention. It is about understanding that something as simple as milk can become something far more complex through time and care. It is about recognizing that cheese is not just a product, but a process, and that this process is shaped by both human intention and natural forces. Across the world, cheese has taken on cultural significance in ways that go beyond nutrition. It is present in celebrations, in everyday meals, and in the identities of regions and peoples. A wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano tells the story of the Italian countryside and its centuries-old regulations. A round of brie speaks of French pastoral traditions. A block of cheddar carries the history of English dairy farming and adaptation. These connections make cheese not only a food, but also a link between past and present, between land and table. In every case, the making of cheese is a slow and deliberate act. It does not seek instant results, but instead allows for the gradual unfolding of texture and flavour. It is an art that is grounded in science, a science that is guided by the senses, and an outcome that is guided by time. The introduction to cheese is therefore an invitation to observe the ordinary made extraordinary by transformation, to appreciate the way that milk changes form through gentle yet precise actions. It is also an acknowledgement that this transformation cannot be hurried. The flavours we associate with cheese develop not in moments, but in hours and days, in months and years. To understand cheese is to understand that slowness is not a drawback, but a necessity. This is the quiet world of cheese, a world that moves at its own pace, where human hands guide natural processes, where each batch tells a unique story, and where time is the most important ingredient of all. At first glance, milk may appear to be a simple liquid, yet within it lies a complex structure of proteins, fats, sugars, minerals, and water, all balanced in a way that allows it to be transformed into countless varieties of cheese. The quality, character, and flavour of the final cheese depend greatly on the type of milk used and the conditions under which it was produced. Milk is not a uniform ingredient. It can come from cows, goats, sheep, or buffalo, and each animal species imparts distinct qualities to the milk it produces. Cow's milk is the most common source worldwide, valued for its abundance and balanced composition of fat and protein. Goat's milk carries a characteristic tang and produces cheeses with a softer texture and whiter colour due to the absence of certain pigments. Sheep's milk is richer in fat and protein-yielding cheeses with dense creamy textures and a full flavour, while buffalo milk is prized for its high fat content and sweetness, making it ideal for soft, luxurious cheeses like mozzarella di bufala. Even within the same species, the nature of milk changes with the season, the animal's diet, and the environment in which it lives. Cows, grazing on fresh spring pasture, produce milk with different flavours and nutrient profiles than cows fed on stored winter hay. The presence of specific plants in an animal's diet can subtly influence the taste of the milk, leading to regional flavour variations that are preserved in the final cheese. This is one reason why traditional cheeses from specific regions often taste unlike any others in the world. Beyond species and diet, milk is also influenced by how it is handled from the moment it leaves the animal. Freshness is critical, as milk begins to change as soon as it is collected. Temperature control is essential because cooling milk slows the activity of natural bacteria and enzymes, preserving its qualities until the cheese-making process begins. In traditional cheese-making, milk is often used raw, meaning it has not been heated to destroy microorganisms. Raw milk carries with it a unique microbial population that can contribute to complex flavors in the final cheese, but it also requires careful handling to ensure safety. In more controlled production settings, milk is often pasteurized to eliminate potentially harmful bacteria. While this process provides consistency and safety, it can also reduce some of the subtle flavors present in raw milk. The cheesemaker must then reintroduce specific cultures to guide the development of flavor and texture. The chemistry of milk is what makes cheesemaking possible. Milk contains casein proteins suspended in a delicate structure called a micelle, which keeps the fat and proteins evenly distributed in the liquid. When enzymes or acids are introduced during cheesemaking, these structures are destabilized, causing the proteins to clump together into curds while releasing the liquid whey. The amount of fat in milk plays a major role in determining the richness and mouthfeel of cheese, while the protein content affects firmness and yield. Higher fat milk leads to creamier, softer cheeses, while lower fat milk can create firmer, more crumbly textures. Minerals in milk, such as calcium and phosphorus, also influence curd formation and stability. The natural sugar in milk, lactose, is another key component. During cheesemaking, lactose is consumed by bacteria and converted into lactic acid, which lowers the pH and affects both the texture and flavor of the cheese. The rate and extent of this acidification must be carefully monitored as it shapes the cheese's final character. Understanding the role of milk in cheesemaking is essential for any cheesemaker. Whether working in a small artisanal creamery or a large industrial facility, the cheesemaker must be able to evaluate milk's condition and make adjustments in the process to achieve the desired result. Milk is more than just a starting point. It is the canvas upon which the art of cheesemaking is painted. Every choice, from the species of animal to the handling of the milk before it reaches the vat, has an influence on the outcome. It is a living ingredient shaped by biology, environment, and human care. Without milk, there can be no cheese, and without an understanding of its nature, the making of cheese would be nothing more than chance. By respecting milk in all its complexity, the cheesemaker honors the foundation upon which their craft is built and ensures that each wheel or block of cheese carries with it the essence of the animal, the land, and the moment in time when the milk was collected. Before the transformation of milk into cheese can begin, the milk must be prepared and standardized to create the best possible conditions for consistent results. This stage is not about rushing forward into the visible changes of curd formation, but about establishing a foundation on which the rest of the process will depend. Preparation begins as soon as the milk arrives at the cheese-making facility, whether it comes directly from the dairy animals on site or is transported from nearby farms. If the milk has travelled, it must be cooled during transport to maintain its freshness and preserve the delicate balance of natural components. Upon arrival, the milk is tested to ensure its quality and safety. These tests measure fat and protein content, as well as check for the presence of unwanted bacteria or contaminants. The goal is to begin with milk that is clean, fresh, and chemically balanced. Standardization is the process of adjusting the milk's composition so that it meets the specific requirements for the cheese being made. Since milk can vary in fat and protein levels depending on the season, the animal's diet, and other factors, the cheesemaker may need to add or remove cream to achieve the desired ratio. This ensures that the cheese will have a consistent texture and flavour from batch to batch, even if the milk supply changes over time. Some cheeses require a richer milk with higher fat content to produce a smooth, creamy body, while others need leaner milk for a firmer, more crumbly texture. The cheesemaker uses precise calculations to determine these adjustments. Another important part of preparation is pasteurization, though not all cheesemakers choose to use it. Pasteurization involves heating the milk to a specific temperature for a set period of time to kill potentially harmful bacteria. While this process improves safety and extends shelf life, it can also alter some of the milk's natural flavor characteristics. In traditional and artisanal cheesemaking, raw milk may be used instead, relying on careful handling and clean production methods to ensure safety while retaining the complexity of flavor that comes from the natural microbial population in the milk. Once the milk's composition and safety are assured, the temperature is carefully adjusted to match the needs of the starter cultures that will soon be added. The heating must be gradual and controlled because sudden temperature changes can disrupt the balance of proteins and fats in the milk, leading to problems later in the process. In larger operations, gentle agitation is used to keep the milk evenly mixed so that fat does not separate and cream does not rise to the surface. This ensures that every part of the milk will respond evenly when cultures and coagulants are introduced. In artisanal settings, these steps may be done by hand, with the cheesemaker watching closely for subtle changes in appearance and feel. The preparation stage may seem like a quiet period compared to the more dramatic stages that follow, but it is no less important. If the milk is not properly standardized and conditioned, even the most skilled cheesemaker cannot fully control the outcome. Small inconsistencies at this stage can lead to noticeable differences in the final cheese's texture, moisture content, and flavor. In this way, preparing and standardizing the milk is an act of patience and precision. It is the point where the natural variability of milk meets the human desire for predictability and quality. By treating this stage with care, the cheesemaker ensures that the next steps in the process will unfold smoothly, allowing the milk to be transformed into cheese that meets both traditional expectations and the maker's own vision. The preparation of milk is therefore not just a technical step, but a thoughtful one, a moment to align the raw ingredient with the intended outcome, and to respect the complex natural substance that is about to be changed forever. Starter cultures and enzymes are the invisible forces that set the transformation of milk into motion, turning it from a liquid into the curds and whey that form the foundation of cheese. Without these agents, milk would eventually sour on its own, but the process would be slow, unpredictable, and unlikely to produce a cheese with desirable texture or flavor. Starter cultures are carefully selected groups of bacteria that perform the essential task of converting lactose, the natural sugar in milk, into lactic acid. This acidification not only develops the initial flavor of the cheese, but also changes the structure of the milk proteins, making them more likely to coagulate when enzymes are introduced. Different types of starter cultures are used depending on the style of cheese being made. Mesophilic cultures thrive at moderate temperatures and are typically used for cheeses like cheddar Gouda and brie, while thermophilic cultures prefer higher temperatures and are necessary for cheeses such as Parmesan, mozzarella, and Gruyere. These cultures are either added directly to the milk as freeze-dried powders or prepared in a small batch of milk beforehand to create an active starter that is then mixed into the larger vat. The cheesemaker must control the temperature of the milk precisely to ensure the cultures grow at the right rate and produce the right amount of acid. Too much acid too quickly can lead to a cheese that is overly crumbly or brittle, while too little can leave it too soft or susceptible to spoilage. Enzymes are the second key component in this stage, and the most important enzyme used in cheesemaking is rennet. Rennet contains chymosin, a substance that acts specifically on casein proteins in milk, breaking them apart so they can form a stable network that traps fat and water, creating the curd. Traditionally, rennet was obtained from the stomach lining of young ruminant animals, such as calves, lambs, or kids. But today, there are also microbial and plant-based alternatives. Regardless of its source, the action of rennet must be carefully timed and measured. Too much rennet can cause the curd to set too quickly or become rubbery, while too little can lead to a weak curd that breaks apart during later stages. The addition of starter cultures and enzymes is not just a technical step, but an act of trust in biological processes. Once they are added, the cheesemaker must wait, watching for subtle changes in the milk's appearance and texture. At first, the milk remains liquid, but over time the enzymes begin to work, and the milk gradually thickens into a gel-like consistency. This moment, known as the set, is critical because it marks the point where the milk is no longer a simple liquid, but is beginning its transformation into cheese. The type of cultures and enzymes chosen will influence the cheese for the rest of its life. They determine not only the early flavor and acidity, but also how the cheese will develop during aging. Some bacteria will remain active long after the curd is formed, slowly breaking down proteins and fats to create complex flavors and aromas. Others may die off after their initial work is done, leaving behind the conditions for other microbes to take over during ripening. Understanding how to select and balance these cultures is a skill that comes with experience. It requires knowledge of the milk's composition, the desired final texture and flavor, and the environmental conditions under which the cheese will be aged. In this way, starter cultures and enzymes are like the opening notes of a piece of music, setting the tone and structure for everything that follows. Without them, the milk would never take on the solid form and rich character that make cheese such a remarkable food. They are the unseen architects, working quietly in the background, shaping the future of the cheese from the moment they are introduced until the last bite is taken. Coagulation is the moment when milk begins its visible transformation into cheese. Up to this point, the liquid milk has been carefully prepared, balanced in composition, and enriched with starter cultures and enzymes. It has been kept at an exact temperature that suits the bacterial cultures and allows the enzymes to work at their slow, deliberate pace. When coagulation begins, the milk, which moments earlier could swirl freely in the vat, starts to thicken into a gel-like mass. This is not a sudden change, but a gradual process that may take anywhere from a few minutes to more than an hour, depending on the type of cheese being made, the composition of the milk, and the conditions in the vat. The transformation is driven by the combined action of acid produced by the bacteria and the rennet enzymes that break specific protein bonds in the casein micelles. The bacteria have been steadily converting lactose into lactic acid, lowering the pH of the milk and changing the structure of the proteins so that they are more likely to come together. The rennet then acts as a catalyst, cutting the kappa casein molecules that normally keep the protein suspended and separate. Once these protective structures are broken, the casein proteins begin to gather into a network trapping fat and water inside. Slowly, the milk loses its fluidity and the surface becomes smooth and slightly elastic. The cheesemaker tests the set by gently inserting a clean knife or finger into the curd. If the cut reveals a clean break with whey filling the gap, the curd is ready to be cut. If the curd still clings and stretches, the cheesemaker waits, allowing the process to continue. This patience is vital because cutting too soon can cause the curd to release whey unevenly, leading to inconsistent texture and moisture in the final cheese. During coagulation, the whey begins to separate even before the curd is cut. The whey is the pale yellow liquid that will be drained away later, but for now it remains trapped in the protein network. Its composition of water, lactose, and some proteins makes it valuable for other uses, such as ricotta production or animal feed. But in the context of cheese making, its gradual separation is a sign that the curd is forming properly. Temperature control during this stage is critical. If the milk is too cool, the coagulation process slows dramatically and the curd may never set firmly. If it is too warm, the process can move too quickly, producing a curd that is tough and difficult to handle. Cheesemakers monitor both temperature and pH closely during this time, making small adjustments to ensure that the process follows the desired curve. In traditional settings, the cheesemaker may work entirely by feel and observation, relying on years of experience to recognize the signs of a perfect set. The moment of coagulation is more than just a technical stage. It is the point where milk ceases to be a simple liquid and becomes a substance that can be shaped, matured, and preserved. It is the invisible line between raw ingredient and crafted product. From here, the cheesemaker will cut and cook the curd, controlling moisture and texture through deliberate action. But none of that is possible without this quiet transformation, in which millions of microscopic interactions align to produce something solid, stable, and full of potential. Coagulation is thus both a scientific process and a moment of quiet craft. A brief period in which the cheesemaker simply waits, watches, and trusts that the cultures and enzymes will perform their work. When the set is complete, the milk has taken on a new identity. It is no longer just milk. It is curd, a substance that can be pressed, salted, aged, and finally enjoyed. This stage is the silent foundation of all that follows in the journey from milk to cheese. Once the curd has set to the perfect firmness, the next stage in cheesemaking begins with the cutting of the curd. This step marks the transition from a single cohesive gel-like mass into small pieces that will eventually become the solid cheese. The cutting process is performed with specialized tools known as curd knives, which are not sharp in the way a kitchen knife is, but instead are designed to slice cleanly through the delicate structure of the curd without crushing it. These knives may have long vertical and horizontal wires arranged in a grid that can cut the curd into even cubes. The size of these cubes is determined by the style of cheese being made. Larger pieces will retain more moisture and create a softer cheese, while smaller pieces will release more whey and result in a firmer texture. The act of cutting is slow and deliberate, allowing the whey to begin separating from the curd. Once the curd is cut, it is gently stirred to prevent the pieces from clumping together. Stirring also helps the curd to release whey more evenly and begin shrinking in size. The movement must be careful and continuous. Too much agitation at this stage could damage the fragile curds, while too little could cause them to mat together into uneven clumps. The stirring process is not merely mechanical, but a precise method of guiding the curds toward the right consistency. In traditional cheesemaking, the cheesemaker may stand over the vat for long periods, watching how the curds move and adjusting the stirring speed accordingly. After stirring begins the cooking phase, often follows. Cooking in cheesemaking does not involve high heat, but rather a gradual and controlled increase in temperature. The purpose of cooking the curd is to encourage further expulsion of whey and to firm up the texture. The temperature is raised slowly, often by just a few degrees at a time, to ensure that the curds develop evenly. Different cheeses require different final cooking temperatures. For example, a high temperature may be used for hard-aged cheeses such as Parmesan, while lower temperatures are maintained for softer varieties like Brie. As the curds are heated, they contract and become firmer, while the whey continues to separate and collect in the vat. The cooking time can vary widely depending on the desired moisture content in the finished cheese. Throughout this process, the cheesemaker is constantly observing the changes in texture and appearance. The curds may start as soft and custard-like, but gradually they become resilient to the touch, springing back slightly when pressed between the fingers. The whey becomes more abundant, and its clarity improves as the cooking proceeds. This indicates that the proteins are binding together in the curd, rather than remaining suspended in the liquid. The combined steps of cutting, stirring, and cooking form a continuous sequence where each action influences the outcome of the next. Cutting exposes more surface area, allowing whey to escape. Stirring keeps the curds separate and uniform. Cooking drives off more moisture and strengthens the curd structure. All three steps must be balanced carefully to produce cheese with the intended characteristics. If the curds are cut too small, they may lose too much moisture and create a dry, crumbly texture. If they are cooked too quickly, the outer layers may harden before the interior has firmed, leading to inconsistencies. Conversely, if the process is too gentle, the cheese may retain excess moisture and spoil more easily. By the end of this stage, the curds are well-defined individual pieces floating in whey. They are ready to be separated from the liquid and shaped into the forms that will define the next stages of cheesemaking. The process of cutting, stirring, and cooking is a quiet discipline, requiring patience, a steady hand, and a deep understanding of how small changes in time, temperature, and movement will influence the final product. It is the stage where the cheesemaker's skill becomes most visible, not in dramatic gestures, but in the subtle control of a process that is both art and science. Draining the whey is the stage where the curds that have been carefully formed, cut, stirred, and cooked are finally separated from the liquid that has surrounded them since the beginning of the cheese-making process. Whey is the pale yellow fluid that remains after milk has coagulated, and it contains water, lactose minerals, and some proteins that were not captured in the curd. The removal of this liquid is essential because it determines the final moisture content of the cheese, which in turn affects texture, flavor, and shelf life. The process begins once the curds have reached the desired firmness and size from the earlier cooking and stirring stage. At this point, the curds are suspended in a vat full of whey. The cheesemaker may allow them to settle slightly at the bottom before opening a valve or tilting the vat to let the liquid flow away. In traditional methods, the whey may be scooped or ladled off by hand with care taken not to disturb the delicate curds. The speed at which the whey is drained is important. If it is removed too quickly, the curds may collapse or lose shape, resulting in a dense, uneven cheese. If it is removed too slowly, the curds may continue to ferment in the whey, producing excess acidity and altering the intended flavor. Some cheeses require partial whey removal, followed by further heating or stirring to encourage additional drainage, while others are drained almost completely before being moved to the next stage. The temperature of the whey at this stage is also significant, because warm whey allows for more efficient draining while helping to maintain the curd's elasticity. The cheesemaker watches for signs of proper drainage, such as the way the curds settle together, or the clarity of the whey as it flows out. Clear whey indicates that the proteins have been successfully captured in the curd, while cloudy whey suggests that solids are being lost in the liquid, which could reduce yield and alter texture. In some traditional practices, the whey is collected and used to make secondary products, such as ricotta, which relies on heating the whey to coagulate the remaining proteins. The drained curds at this stage are still fragile and need to be handled gently to maintain their structure. In certain styles of cheesemaking, the curds are allowed to mat together naturally in the vat, forming a cohesive mass that can then be cut into blocks for pressing. In other styles, the curds are transferred into molds immediately after whey removal, where they will begin to take on the shape and density of the finished cheese. The draining stage is a moment where the transformation from curd to cheese becomes visually clear. The curds now stand on their own, without the support of the liquid, and they have a texture that can be felt and shaped. The removal of whey also limits the activity of the bacteria by reducing the available lactose and changing the environment inside the curd. This sets the stage for the next steps in the process, where salting, pressing, and aging will develop the final flavor and structure. Draining whey is not a dramatic or fast process, but it is one of quiet precision, where the cheesemaker relies on both sensory observation and experience to know exactly when the curds are ready to move forward. In this way, it is another example of how cheesemaking is a balance between the natural progression of microbial and enzymatic activity and the guiding hand of human skill. Every drop of whey that leaves the vat marks a small but irreversible step in the creation of cheese, moving it closer to the final form that will be aged, ripened, and enjoyed. Molding and pressing the cheese is the stage in which the loose curds that have been drained of whey are shaped into a unified form that will eventually become the finished cheese. This process begins once the curds have been transferred from the vat to the molds, which are usually made of food-safe plastic wood or stainless steel. These molds are designed to give the cheese its specific size and shape, whether it is a small round wheel, a large block, or a tall cylindrical form. Before filling the molds, the cheesemaker may line them with cheesecloth. This cloth helps keep the curds together, while also allowing excess whey to drain during pressing. The curds are placed into the molds either in one large mass or in layers, depending on the style of cheese being made. During this stage, the curds are still soft and pliable, and they can be gently pressed into place by hand to ensure that they fill all corners of the mold evenly. Pressing begins soon after the curds are in the molds. The purpose of pressing is to expel any remaining whey and to knit the curds together into a solid piece. The amount of pressure applied varies according to the type of cheese. Soft cheeses may require only light pressing to encourage cohesion, while hard cheeses demand strong sustained pressure to achieve the desired density. The pressure can be applied manually with weights or mechanically using specialized cheese presses that allow for precise control over force and time. As the curds are pressed, whey continues to flow out through the perforations in the mold or through the weave of the cheesecloth. This process not only removes moisture, but also influences the texture and structural integrity of the cheese. Too much pressure, too quickly, can cause the curds to seal on the outside, while trapping moisture inside, leading to defects. Too little pressure can result in a cheese that crumbles or fails to develop a consistent texture. Pressing may take only a few hours for some cheeses, while others remain under pressure for a full day or more. The cheesemaker will often flip the cheese periodically during pressing. Flipping ensures that the cheese develops an even shape and that moisture drains uniformly from all sides. Each turn requires care to avoid tearing the surface or distorting the shape. Over time, the curds become more compact and the surface smooths as the cheese takes on its final form. By the end of pressing, the cheese has transformed from a loose collection of curds into a firm, cohesive body. The surface may still bear the faint impression of the cheesecloth or the small holes of the mold, but these marks are a natural part of traditional cheese making. At this stage, the cheese is structurally stable enough to be removed from the mold, but still young and not yet ready for consumption. The moisture content at the end of pressing will largely determine the texture of the final product once it is aged. A lower moisture cheese will be firm and suitable for long aging, while a higher moisture cheese will be softer and mature more quickly. Molding and pressing is one of the most hands-on parts of the cheese-making process, requiring physical effort, precise timing, and attention to detail. It is the point where the cheesemaker can see and feel the cheese becoming a tangible finished object, even though its flavors and aromas will continue to develop in the days, weeks, or months ahead. This step sets the foundation for the cheese's appearance, texture, and structural strength, all of which are essential to its identity and quality. Salting the cheese is a stage that serves several important purposes in the cheese-making process. It is not only a matter of enhancing flavor, but also a critical step in controlling moisture, influencing texture, and preserving the cheese. The process can be carried out in different ways, depending on the style of cheese being produced. Some cheeses are salted by rubbing dry salt onto their surfaces. Others have salt mixed directly into the curds before pressing, and many are submerged in brine baths for hours or even days. Regardless of the method, the function of the salt remains consistent. Once applied, the salt begins to draw moisture out of the cheese through osmosis. This helps lower the water content of the cheese, which slows the growth of unwanted bacteria and molds. At the same time, the salt penetrates into the curd structure, enhancing flavor and strengthening the texture by encouraging protein bonding. When salting is done on the surface, the rate of penetration depends on factors such as temperature, humidity, and the composition of the cheese itself. Harder cheeses require longer periods for the salt to fully diffuse to the center, while softer cheeses absorb salt more quickly. In brining, the entire wheel or block of cheese is immersed in a concentrated salt solution. The length of time in the brine is carefully determined by the cheesemaker, as too much time can lead to an overly salty flavor and a dry texture, while too little time can result in blandness and inadequate preservation. The concentration of the brine is also critical, often maintained at a specific percentage to achieve the right balance of flavor and microbial control. Salting also plays a role in the development of the rind. For cheeses that will form a natural rind, salt applied to the surface helps control the types of microorganisms that can grow there, guiding the maturation process and influencing the aroma and appearance of the finished cheese. In washed rind cheeses, salt works alongside regular washing to cultivate specific bacterial communities that give these cheeses their distinctive smell and taste. For cheeses where salt is added directly into the curds before olding and pressing, the process is more immediate. The salt is distributed evenly throughout the curds, ensuring that the entire cheese has a consistent flavor and moisture balance from the start. This method is common for cheeses intended to be eaten fresh or aged only briefly. The amount of salt used must be precise. Excessive salt can mask the natural flavors of the milk and cultures, while insufficient salt can allow spoilage organisms to thrive. Experienced cheesemakers often rely on both measurement and sensory judgment, understanding how different batches of milk respond to salting based on seasonal variations, fat content, and intended aging period. Salting marks the transition from the structural stages of cheesemaking, such as coagulation, draining, and pressing, to the slow and complex process of aging. It is a quiet yet decisive act, one that locks in the work done so far and sets the stage for the development of the cheese's final character. From this point forward, the cheese will be stored and matured under carefully controlled conditions, but its fundamental flavor profile will already have been shaped by how and when the salt was applied. Salting is therefore not just a finishing touch, but a deeply integral part of cheesemaking, balancing flavor, preservation, and texture in a way that has been refined over centuries of practice. Aging and maturation of cheese is the phase in which time transforms a young, freshly made product into something far more complex in flavor, texture, and aroma. This process begins immediately after the cheese has been salted and prepared for storage. The conditions in which the cheese is aged are carefully maintained to encourage the right kinds of biochemical and microbial activity while preventing spoilage. Temperature and humidity are the two most important environmental factors during maturation. Most cheeses are aged in cool environments where temperatures are kept within a narrow range to slow down undesirable bacterial growth, while allowing enzymatic reactions to proceed at a controlled pace. Humidity is equally important, as too much moisture in the air can lead to unwanted mold growth, while too little can cause the cheese to dry out and crack. Many cheeses are aged in dedicated caves or climate-controlled rooms that mimic traditional cave-like conditions. During maturation, the proteins and fats in the cheese undergo slow breakdown through the action of enzymes from the milk, starter cultures, and in some cases, added molds or bacteria. This breakdown releases a variety of flavor compounds, which give aged cheeses their distinctive taste. A young cheddar, for example, may taste mild and slightly creamy, but after months or years of aging, it develops sharpness, nuttiness, and depth that cannot be replicated without time. The texture also changes significantly. Cheeses that start soft and pliable may become firm, crystalline, or even crumbly as moisture is lost and protein structures are altered. In some varieties, such as Brie or Camembert, maturation softens the interior to a creamy consistency, while the rind becomes more pronounced in flavor and appearance. Handling during aging is often deliberate and methodical. Some cheeses are turned regularly to ensure even moisture distribution and prevent deformation. Others are brushed, washed with brine, or rubbed with oil or herbs to influence the development of the rind and surface flora. Washed rind cheeses, for instance, are periodically bathed in a solution that encourages the growth of specific bacteria, giving them a strong aroma and reddish-orange exterior. The length of aging varies enormously, depending on the type of cheese and the desired characteristics. Fresh cheeses may be aged for only a few days, while hard cheeses, like Parmesan, can be matured for 2 years or more. Throughout the aging process, the cheesemaker monitors progress through touch, smell, and taste, assessing whether the cheese is developing as intended. Even small variations in environmental conditions, milk composition, or microbial activity can lead to noticeable differences in the final product. Aging is both an art and a science. It requires patience because once the cheese is in the aging room, there is no quick way to accelerate the natural transformations without compromising quality. It also requires a deep understanding of how all the factors interact over time. By the time the cheese is deemed ready, it has completed a long journey from fresh milk to a finished product rich in history, craftsmanship, and flavor. Maturation is therefore not just the final step, but the culmination of every stage that came before it, revealing the full potential of the cheesemaker's skill and the raw materials used. The craft of cheesemaking is a testament to the enduring relationship between human ingenuity, natural processes, and the raw materials provided by the land. From its earliest origins, thousands of years ago, to the sophisticated and varied production methods of today, cheesemaking has remained a process grounded in patience, precision, and respect for tradition. The transformation from milk to cheese is deceptively simple in appearance, yet profoundly complex in its underlying science and artistry. Each stage, from selecting the milk to shaping the curds, salting, and aging, contributes in essential ways to the final product, and even the smallest variation can lead to a cheese that is unique in flavor, texture, and character. What makes cheesemaking remarkable is the balance between control and surrender. The cheesemaker can guide temperature, timing, and technique, but the slow work of microbes and enzymes is beyond direct control and relies on an understanding of how nature behaves under specific conditions. This dynamic has not changed since ancient times, even as tools and technology have advanced. It is this blend of human skill and natural transformation that gives cheese its individuality and richness. Across the world, cheese making reflects cultural identity and local environments. The same basic principles can produce dramatically different results depending on the breed of animals that provide the milk, the composition of the pasture they graze upon, the climate in which the cheese is aged, and the customs of the people who make it. Regional varieties are not just foods, but cultural expressions, carrying with them stories of place, heritage, and continuity. The sensory experience of cheese also speaks to this timeless craft. The texture under the knife, the aroma released upon cutting, the way the flavors evolve on the palate, all are the culmination of decisions made and actions taken over weeks, months, or even years. The result is something both familiar and ever-changing, as no two batches can be perfectly identical. In an age when food production is often industrialized and standardized, traditional cheesemaking stands as a reminder of the value of time, care, and individuality. Even in larger scale operations, there is a recognition that certain aspects of the process must remain slow and deliberate if the quality and character of the cheese are to be preserved. Cheesemaking also connects us to the rhythms of the seasons and the cycles of nature. Milk composition changes throughout the year, influenced by climate, feed, and animal health, and these variations are reflected in the final cheese. This seasonal influence ensures that cheese is never static, but always a living product shaped by its environment. As the cheese leaves the hands of the maker and reaches those who will enjoy it, it carries with it the work, knowledge, and traditions of countless generations who have perfected the methods over time. It is more than nourishment. It is a bridge between past and present, between science and art, between nature and human craft. In concluding the journey through the slow and detailed process of cheese making, it becomes clear that this is not merely a method for preserving milk, but a celebration of transformation itself. Every wheel, block, or round of cheese embodies a story of where it came from, how it was made, and the people who brought it into being. It is a craft that invites us to slow down, to appreciate the long passage of time, and to savor not only the taste but also the process that created it.